Hello, how's everyone doing today? Haneman here. Welcome to a 60s edition of Guitar Tone Tuesday with a very obscure Japanese-made an electric guitar, clearly, called a Winston. Winston, of all things, right? Now, this company has a very obscure history, which I am going to attempt to speak with authority about, even though I am no expert. I just memorized a whole bunch of facts about this company. Now, if you guys like weird guitars like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Lucas Haneman YouTube page, because we love talking about weird, obscure, sometimes old guitars like this one right here. Now, this guitar belonged to a very good friend of the channel and a very good friend of mine, Guy. Now, Guy is a very enthusiastic guy when it comes to guitars, and he recently had this thing refretted by Jerome Jeffries, who is an amazing Ottawa-based luthier, and I gotta say, it's playing really, really good. Now, let's talk a little bit about the history of these guitars. Now, I'm going to play something just a little bit more kind of normal for you before we do that. I'm going to turn off the trem, and let's just hear some of the different pickup positions that this guitar has. So this is just both pickups together to start off. Okay, let's go to just the bridge pickup. All right, super cool. Just the neck pickup. Okay, I said I was going to play normal stuff, but this guitar just makes me want to play super weird, like film score music type stuff. So let's talk about this guitar. Okay, again, I'm going to speak with an authority. I'm going to speak like an authority on a subject that I don't know a lot about, but I'm going to do my best here, okay, guys? So, and these are all facts that I've attempted to memorize here. So, the Winston Guitar Company came about. It was a time in music. We got to remember here that the Beatles had played the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, right? And music was in a very interesting place at that time. Everybody and their grandmother and their sister wanted a guitar. So there was a lot of Japanese companies popping up doing import guitars. Now, at that time, in the mid-60s, Japanese import guitars were kind of viewed like Korean import guitars were viewed maybe in the 90s. Of course, people love guitars from Korea now, just like they came to love guitars from Japan after the fact. But at that time, they were kind of seen as cheap guitars. Now, most people who just wanted to play casually could not afford a Gibson, a Fender, a Martin, or a Gretsch, which were kind of the big guitars of the day. So that's why brands like Guyatone came in, brands like Teisco came in, and then other more obscure brands like Winston came into the fold as well. Now, there was a wholesaler from New York, and I'm going to butcher this name, but it's basically called Buegeleisen and Jacobson, or maybe Buegeleisen and Jacobson, but I'm going to say Buegeleisen because it sounds kind of cool. Now, Buegeleisen and Jacobson had been around since the late 1890s, and by the 1960s, they were selling a lot of relatively inexpensive guitars and other instruments. Like they were selling Kay, they were selling National, they were also selling Abbott brass instruments, companies like this. And they started importing guitars from this company called Kawai. Now, Kawai had been around for quite a while by this point, but in 1954, Kawai had started making guitars. Kawai was initially a company that their goal from Japan, their goal was to make really good quality pianos at a decent price, and that is a mission that they are still fulfilling to this day. Actually, Kawai pianos are very good pianos for the price, as far as I know. But they did dabble in guitars for a little while, so they were making, like I say, they were making their own guitars, and then they started making Winston guitars. And it gets a little bit hazy because they also purchased Teisco, from what I can see, and they started making the Teisco guitars. Now, this is where a lot of people have disagreements. A lot of people see similarities between this guitar and a Guyatone, although Guyatone claims to have no affiliation with Winston. But what we do know is that sometime in the mid-60s, this brand, Winston, came about, and they were very similar to the Kawai guitars, except for the fact that the pickups were different. By about 1970, the Winston guitar brand faded into obscurity. So there we go. Those are my facts for the day. But, there were a lot of guitars like this out there, and I can speak with a little bit of authority on this because my dad was around at the time. I definitely wasn't. I was not a prospect until almost when the 80s were done. But, my dad was around at this time, and my dad was in a high school band, and he played K guitars. He played many guitars of the time. He speaks a lot about some of those companies. And he doesn't remember this specific brand, but, there were a lot of import guitars from Sears. You had your Silvertones, and he certainly had that. And there were many other brands as well. But needless to say, this is a funky old guitar, and it sounds very cool. So I'm going to pick up a pick, and we're going to hear it a little bit. One thing that makes it special is that we do have this kind of Bigsby bar here, so you can get some really subtle shake. It's a really nice Bigsby, actually, or Bigsby style thing. And it certainly does that surfy thing real well. The pickups are extremely microphonic on this guitar, which is something that I think is kind of cool about it. Although, as you heard in the intro, I mean, I did that on purpose, but you got to be careful with a lot of heavy overdrive on this guitar because it certainly can feedback because it's fully hollow. But listen to how microphonic these pickups are. If I just tap on the guitar and the pickups, super microphonic and just as loud as the actual sound from the guitar. So really interesting. You know, these are not gold foils, but they're a little bit in that vein, you know, kind of like DeArmond style pickups. And yeah, I mean, the pickups do sound really interesting. And it's a cool sounding guitar because it lacks sustain, but it gives it this kind of old school thing, which is really cool. You know, I shouldn't say it lacks sustain. It has a lot of attack right when you first hit the note. It doesn't have the most sustain, but it's pretty cool. If I put on some mild overdrive, it certainly doesn't feedback too much. It's a cool little guitar. It's really cool. Pretty cool. And you know, I'm plugged in today to this 1962 Fender Princeton because the buyer of this guitar claims that it was made in 1964. My friend Guy. And so I thought that, you know, we got to go full 60s on this episode of GTT. Why not, right? When in Rome, you got to go there. So it's very cool. You know, it's very, very cool. I've got some reverb from a Strymon Flint and some delay from the Strymon Flint. And then that really massive, nasty fuzz that you heard earlier was this Black Cat fuzz that I got here. And it's called a bebop fuzz. And so it does that kind of Jack White thing when you want it to, you know, that's for sure. Cool, right? And it's like I say, it's fully hollow. I think it actually is wood, unlike, you know, some of the guitars of the time. Interesting shape, right? Very interesting shape. We got maple neck with a very large Fender style headstock. It's an interesting beast, man. It's an interesting beast. Now, I will say, actually, if anyone is interested in this guitar who's local to me, keep me posted, because Guy has decided to sell this and move it on to a home where it will get played a lot. So please let me know in the comment section down below. Have you ever heard of Winston guitars? And did you have fun? Did you enjoy this episode of the show? And that's about it for this week. We will see everybody again next Tuesday. Thank you, Guy. Thanks for learning this thing. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.